Hi everyone, welcome. It's Alison Proffit here with Proffit Talks, and I am so thrilled to be joined this morning by Alison Rakotonirina from Life Work Purpose. And I'm going to let Alison do a little bit of intro about herself, but I can tell you that she is an amazing coach. She's doing some great work in this world, helping people with how they put themselves out in the world. We're going to have just some great conversation. We're going to share some tips. She does a lot of work in the LinkedIn space. And I know in this digital world that we're in today, we're all trying to make sure we figure out how are we putting ourselves out there and how do we use all the tools. But we'll get to all that later. First, Alison, welcome. How are you today?
I am doing well, coming to you from Madagascar. So end of my day, and I realize where you are is the start of your day. So
It is. Yes.
yeah.
I love that technology allows us to connect with people from all over the world and that you're joining us from Madagascar. I have so many questions about that, but that would be a whole nother Proffit Talks episode. So, so Alison, give us a little rundown. Tell us a little bit about what you do, how you got to where you are.
Yeah. So I am a career coach and you could say story coach. And in that, I help people to find clarity around their career and or around telling their stories so they can have a career that they love. And I really got this start by working as a ghostwriter. And working as a ghostwriter, you learn to take on other people's voice to tell their story, essentially. And that led me to resume writing, to writing biographies, bios, and LinkedIn profiles, whatnot. And it was over time with that I really started to connect with the vulnerabilities that people needed, vulnerabilities, I should say, that people needed to share with me for me to be able to tell their story. And then that also led me to see where some people lacked confidence, where people lacked clarity, and that led me to studying positive psychology and also life coaching, which brings you to where I am today. And at that most basic level, I still write resumes, I still write LinkedIn profiles, but I'm also very much passionate about helping people figure out how to do this themselves so that they don't have to hire me, or maybe they hire me this time, but next time they can do it themselves. And so I also do the story coaching around it. I write profiles with people sometimes. There's sort of lots of different levels that I come in at.
Yeah, I love that. Just the evolution of it and just teaching people, walking beside them, showing them how to do things because it's empowering to them so they don't feel like they're always having to reach out for help, because I think that can put us in a place of almost like just desperation or just that victim kind of place where it's like, I don't know what I'm doing. Um, so I love the storytelling aspect. Before we started this recording, I had Alison share a little story about herself, which we'll get there in a moment. I'm still figuring out in my brain where I want to bring that story in. But I know that when we were preparing for this conversation a few weeks ago, we were talking about the idea of job crafting. And I would love for you to share a little bit more about that concept and um, how you came across it, what it means, and just let's just talk about this job crafting thing. As you know, my background's in HR, so as you were telling me about that, I thought this is a fascinating topic.
Yeah, so job crafting is something that some people do naturally and some HR departments help people to do. But it's also something that a lot of people don't know about. And I think it's powerful in the sense, we may overuse the words power and powerful, empowering today, but they're important.
They are important.
Because a lot of
They're
times
powerful.
yeah, exactly. When people are in a job or looking for work and they get to that point where something is missing, be it financial, be it spiritual, be it intellectual, or there's some sort of toxic situation, there's too much stress, all of these different things. That job crafting sounds so simple, is just a mindset in one sense, but it's also a tool to help you to get unstuck and to enjoy what you're doing. And it can be used at work in your current job, or it can be used to craft that pivot, to craft that lateral move, to find a new job. And it might be easier to sort of start with some outcomes and then sort of get into it, is that if somebody does the work of job crafting, one outcome might be that they're simply happier in their current job and they stay right where they are. Another outcome might be that they move laterally within the same company. Another outcome might be that they get a promotion or go backwards, not as in a negative sense, but back to a place where they were before, because maybe they got promoted for being good at something, even though they don't enjoy it. It might result in getting the same job, but at a different company, because maybe it's the company that's the problem, not you. Or it might be a complete pivot, you know, starting your own company, going back to school, totally new career. And so job crafting gives you the clarity and the confidence to do any one of those things, understand why you're doing it, and do it powerfully so that you.
Yeah, I'd love for you to share how, because I see the connection, but I'd love to hear your positioning on how this job crafting mindset translates into the small business world, because that really is my that's kind of like most of my audience is really in that, looking to be in that entrepreneur space. Maybe they're in the corporate world and looking to move into that entrepreneurial space. And I think that can be a difficult shift, right? Where it's just like you're used to looking for the resume, or not the resume, the job description that lists out all the things. But in the entrepreneur space, I mean, we were talking about this earlier too, before we hopped on this call. It's like, there's no boss telling you, holding the mirror saying like, oh, you're missing this part of your job, or, oh, it looks like you're in indecision, what's happening there? Like, you have to do all the things. So how can this job crafting mindset be helpful, and how would you help an entrepreneur in using that skill in their own business?
Yeah, it's very, very relevant to the small business world, and it's particularly to the entrepreneur that is running their own small business as well, or would like to do. And so if you break it down into three specific areas, there is task crafting, so like the things that you do during the day. There is your mindset, or the cognitive sort of way, you know, what is the impact you make? How do you see the value in your work and what you do? And then there's also the relationships that, or, you know, you can call it relational crafting. On the most basic level, to answer your question, you know, how could a small business owner use it? Is, let's say you've started off and you've got this amazing idea and you're very, very passionate about it, and you hate numbers, but you feel like you have to do your own accounting or your own taxes or anything, budgeting, all of these things. And you find that you are spending hours doing it, or you keep putting it off. And so you're in fact losing money, potentially, quite likely, because you are not an accountant, you are not a bookkeeper. So if you were to hire somebody or delegate that out, it might have that upfront cost of having to pay somebody probably a decent salary or hourly wage. But in the long run, you're going to be happier doing what you're good at and letting somebody else do what they're good at. And so that upfront may not sound like task crafting, but it is. It's choosing what you're doing so that you can do it well, and delegating and putting something else somewhere else.
I love that. So this is really interesting. And, you know, I don't know what your beliefs are in terms of just noticing serendipitous, intuitive hits, like when things happen and you're like, wow, that's so crazy. So I shared, I'm in a process of expanding some of the things that I do in my business, Profit Coach. Right now, I really focus on helping small service-based business owners with their sales. and learning how to sell, figuring out what they want to sell, what are they passionate about, how do they package it, how do they price it, and then how do they sell it from a heart-centered and authentic place. And this whole idea, because I come from that HR world, and I understand organizational design and all of those things. And I just have a lot of understanding about business. What I've been seeing with a lot of my clients, who many have come out of the corporate world wanting to start their own business because they all the reasons, right? They want to do what they want to do. They're just tired of working for somebody else. They want freedom, flexibility, whatever the case may be. And they have an idea, and then they jump out and they start a business, and they don't understand all the things. They think they have to do all the things. They think it's really hard and expensive to hire somebody to do all the things. And that's actually the pivot that it's not a pivot, it's an expansion of my business. And I'm creating a program. It's like the first time I'm actually going to probably talk about it in a recorded thing. It's called Path to Profits. And it's essentially like an incubator for service-based entrepreneurs, and helping them learn all of the things and then evaluating which of the things do they struggle with. And I have so many amazing people that I've collected in my own circle that I really trust, who will be helping with those things. And it's really like this one-stop shop when you're starting your business. And I love this idea of the task crafting, because it is important to figure out, what do you like? What are you good at? How does all that fit in with the vision? Because something that you like and are good at might actually not be the best use of your time for where you're trying to go. And that's an important thing to understand. And so I just love that that just came out in this conversation, because I think people forget that that's something that they ought to be doing, as a small business owner. And then they wait until they're so far down the path. From the bookkeeping example, it's like, oh, now you have to go backwards for a year and go backwards and, categorize all of your expenses a year down the road versus if you would start from there, start with a bookkeeper, start with knowing, is that a task that you could easily just do yourself, or do you need to have that extra support and help? So I love that. It's really, I think the word that comes to mind as you're talking about this is it's consciousness, and having that level of consciousness around the things and not just blindly doing. That's kind of what we do in the workplace, right? When we go into corporate, is we're just doing what we're told because we are an employee, and that's a big part of the employer and employee relationship. You don't get to just walk in and be like, these are the parts of the job that I'm deciding that I really want to do. It doesn't necessarily work that way. If you work in a forward-thinking company, that could be a conversation you could have. But most of the workplaces aren't that way. How do you respond to any of that I just, kind of rambled on about?
Yeah, well, what was coming up for me there is going to take off of that interest, that just because you like something doesn't mean it's necessarily what you should be focusing on right now. Because one big aspect of job crafting is that idea of, what are my values, what are my interests, what are my strengths, and what do I want to do more of, what do I want to do less of, but also, what are my weaknesses? And a lot of times, I'd say in the last 10 to 20 years, people get really excited about strengths, and often a misconception with strengths is that you shouldn't work on your weaknesses. And if you think of, a boat, if you're a sailboat and you don't put up your sail, then you're not using your strength, right? But if you've got some leaks or holes in your sailboat and you don't put a cork in them, if you don't stop them, you're going to sink.
Right.
So you still have to address your weaknesses. And so I think that's really, in one sense, what you're getting at. And so, you can't ignore, and I think a little bit of the accounting thing, because when I was in the corporate or the business world, that was one of the things so many people try to push over here. And you do need to understand the numbers, even if you have somebody else run the numbers.
Yes.
And that's just being a grown up. It's taking it's
I don't
being real,
wanna.
right? and so, you know, be real. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? And what maybe you need some help up, or what you need to beef up on to do better.
Yeah.
And not be afraid.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, when you small business owners are the fastest to say, well, I'm just going to outsource that. I'm just going to outsource that. And my HR brain goes, okay, you're going to outsource that. But when you are and that's like hiring somebody. When you're hiring for a position in your organization, even though you're not hiring them as an employee, you are hiring them to do work for you, for your business. My HR brain goes to, you need to understand the job and the talent needed well enough to be able to hire for that role. And then you need to understand the work well enough to train the person and hold them accountable, like manage their performance. If you are hiring, whether it's somebody helping you with your accounting and bookkeeping, or whether it's somebody helping you with your social media, or if you're hiring a salesperson to sell your stuff and you have no idea, that person could take advantage of you and not actually do the things that you're paying them to do. And I'm not saying that to scare anybody, but it is that taking responsibility from a high level, conscious, empowered place. There's that word again. It's like, wouldn't you want to know that stuff so that you can ask really smart questions? And I think that's what job crafting is all about, right? It's asking ourselves really smart questions. It's maybe asking the people around us really smart questions. If you're an employee and looking to craft a job within your own organization where you already work, it's, you know, what are the questions to ask the organization and the managers and the people that are making the decisions? So it's all about asking smart questions, stopping enough to ask the questions and not just blindly moving through the motions, I think. Yeah, so like conscious questioning. Gosh, Alison, I just love this question so much, or like this whole topic. I just love it so much. So you talked a little bit about the relational crafting. Can you share a little bit more about what you mean by that?
Well, I think it ties into actually what we were just talking about, in the sense that who are you working with, and what is your relationship with them? And so, you know, if you are not a manager type, but you have people working under you, how do you craft those expectations? How do you practice direct communication? How do you plan ahead so that you don't have problems? Because again, just saying I'm a bad manager or I don't like managing people doesn't work if you have to work with other people, or if you're in that position of leadership. And so another way to think of it could be that you know, this is a place you could go into, for example, where things like the MBTI, the Myers-Briggs, comes into place, or the DISC things and stuff like that. You know, a lot of times people are given these and they're supposed to enlighten them about themselves.
Yeah.
But what they're really useful are for these relationships. And so if you are a judger and somebody else is a perceiver, then just knowing that means that what you say or what they say may not mean the same thing. And so a lot of times people get their toes stepped on. And this starts, you know, all of these kind of overlaps. This sort of also starts then going into the mindset or the cognitive part a little bit, but is just being aware of how you work, your learning style, your communication style, and what works for you, what do you need. Maybe you like to get an email once a week or once a day. maybe somebody else feels a lot better picking up the phone and making a phone call. So understanding how people work and interact and making sure that that's balanced so that you're getting the information that you need, you're getting the communication that you need, and that those relationships that you need for your business are in a healthy spot.
I love that. I'm going to bring that story that you told me earlier into the picture, because it's a story, and I'll have you share a little bit about it if you're, open to doing so. But at the end of the story, you shared about how your dad ended up kind of stopping and realizing what was happening and kind of like who you were, like the relationship. So I'd love for you to just kind of bring some levity to the conversation and share this amazing story. So I asked Alison to share sort of just like a funny little story about herself, and so it threw her for a loop. And she paused for a moment and shared what came up for her. So I love the story. It's really fun. So I hope you guys enjoy it too. Tell us the story, Alison. As a storyteller, I'm sure you love the fact that I asked you to tell a story, right?
And I also, it's funny because when you asked me, what's something funny you have to share, I thought, my God, why did this story pop up? And now I realize that part of it is because my father was an artist. He worked from home. He had a studio. And for the longest time, I was so depressed that I couldn't do what my dad did because I'm not artistic. Like I can't draw. I wouldn't say, but I am creative. And I create with words, I create in different ways. And so in the long run, I've actually almost ended up creating a lifestyle very similar to my father's, but it took me forever to get there. But I did it through this job crafting.
Yeah.
And so the story was that I used to have a desk in my dad's studio, and he had quit smoking and would chew like a pack of big red gum. I think there were 17 pieces or something strange in those big packs that they used to have. And I was fully equipped with art supplies and crafting supplies as the daughter of an artist. And so I started making little pieces of big red gum out of balsa wood. And I would periodically open up a piece and put it in, decorate it, make it look like big red gum, put it back in the silver wrapper, put it back in the pack of gum. And, once every 30 days to 3 months, my dad would get a piece of balsa wood gum. And the first time he almost got mad, and kind of like, he lived in New York for a long time. So if you consider like that New Yorker sort of way, like, what the hell is going on here?
Yeah.
And then I could see across the room his brain turning, and he's like, this is my daughter. Because my dad had raised me telling me all these pranks. And I was only about 8 years old when I started doing this. And I did it for several years. It didn't just disappear one day. But that was really him recognizing that I had learned this from him. And of course, I was his daughter, so.
Yeah. And you mentioned that he was also a little bit of a trickster. So he taught you to craft, he taught you to be creative, taught you to bring kind of joking and fun into life. And there you were right in front of him, just doing what he's modeled for you. I love that. And I love the fact too, it's like he could have got mad about it, but then he recognized what was happening. And I think that's what a beautiful lesson, right? Just for wherever you are in this world, whatever it is that you're doing in this life, is that, before we react, let's take a breath, let's take a moment, let's be conscious and craft our response from that place. Mm-hmm. So Alison, I'd love for you to share how people can find you, work with you. I know you're in Madagascar, but you actually are from the States, so you sort of do your work globally, which I think is amazing. So tell us how people can get to you. And all this will be in the show notes or wherever you find them on the platform you're on.
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm very happy for people to connect with me on LinkedIn. I do a fair amount of publishing on there, tips on various aspects of telling your story, coaching, job search, those sorts of things. And I'm just Alison Rakotonirina on LinkedIn. You don't have to look at my whole name, or you can. I'm the only one, either way. And you can also find me just at lifeworkspurpose.com. And so that has my main services there. And I'm always happy to have a curiosity call with folks to chat about where your situation is and, you know, where in your process or where in your story, you know, do you need to take off your mask and really be yourself, or is it just that you need a little bit more clarity and confidence in your words? My favorite sort of mantra is to not let humility be mistaken for mediocrity. And so that's really what I help people do, is to tell their stories, to connect with their either employers or their customers in an authentic voice.
I love that so much. Alison, it's been a great conversation. Thank you for sharing a little bit of snippets of your life and the work that you do, and for just bringing your knowledge and wisdom to the world in the way that you do. I think it's really amazing. Well, this is the end of yet another episode of Proffit Talks. I'd love for you to be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on all the socials at Proffit Coach, and that's profit like making money, but with 2 F's, because I always say more is better. So thank you again for being here. If you're watching, we are grateful for you to go out there and sell and serve to the world with love. Thanks so much, everybody. See you next time.